Australia's economy is facing quite the slowdown.
Here's why Australia's economy is cooked, and it's not just bad luck.
As a country, Australia is falling apart.
If you've been wondering why you can't afford groceries or to live, let me show you.
Household debt to income ratio is a whopping 200%.
Australia just broke a world record, but not the good kind.
A cost of living crisis because of inflation.
You might not know this, but the latest GDP figures are out and it's not looking good.
Everything wrong with Australia can be explained in 60 seconds.
I'm really sick of people blaming Australia's housing crisis on immigrants as an opportunity to be racist.
Australia has gone down the drain even more since the Prime Minister got re-elected.
The currency is weak, houses cost millions, and our wages are still stuck in 2012.
Australia was once sold as the land of prosperity, a strong economy, steady growth, and the promise that hard work meant stability. But today, that illusion has shattered. The economy is in crisis. GDP is falling, prices are skyrocketing, and everyday Australians are being crushed under the weight of a system that no longer works. Groceries, rent, fuel, electricity, everything is expensive. Every trip to the supermarket feels like a robbery. Every bill feels like punishment. Wages are stagnant, savings are evaporating, and families are forced to choose between essentials. Survival has become the national pastime. Meanwhile, GDP is sliding. Growth has stalled. Productivity is collapsing. And the so-called lucky country is staring down the possibility of economic freefall. Politicians call it challenging. Economists call it cyclical. But for ordinary Australians, it feels like collapse. This isn't just inflation. This isn't just a downturn. This is a systemic failure. A nation where prosperity has been replaced with panic, where stability has been replaced with survival, and where collapse is no longer unthinkable, it's inevitable.
Australia isn't fine. It's collapsing in real time, and they've trained you not to notice. The currency is weak, houses cost millions, and our wages are still stuck in 2012. 500,000 migrants get dumped into a broken system. Rents are up, groceries are up, interest rates are up, but what is not up is our wages. We're essentially paying more to live worse. This isn't even a country anymore. It's a corporate rental complex that's paying you to survive, not thrive. And the worst part is most people think voting will fix all of this. It won't. Australia won't collapse with a war. It'll collapse in silence, and the ones aware enough will know how to escape it.
Australia has gone down the drain even more since the Prime Minister got re-elected. Here are a few of the new taxes they are talking about introducing. Under this government, it doesn't matter what the problem is, his solution is just more taxes. More taxes that the Australian people have to pay. Number one, they want to increase the income tax even higher than what it is now. They also want to tax you on your unrealised income that you haven't actually earned yet. And on top of that, they want to follow the UK and introduce an inheritance tax. As if paying tax wasn't bad enough when you're alive, now you're going to be paying it when you're dead.
Everything wrong with Australia can be explained in 60 seconds. Watch this.
Australians, you have natural resources that are the envy of the rest of the world. You're the Saudi Arabia of the Southern Hemisphere.
But we got to save the planet.
You export 7 times more coal than you consume, and yet you don't want to burn coal.
We prefer the Chinese to burn our coal instead of us.
You have nearly 30% of the world's uranium, and you won't build nuclear reactors.
Mate, we can't even tell you what a woman is in this country. There's no way we're going to build a nuclear reactor.
You export 3 times more natural gas in the form of LNG than you consume, and you won't drill for gas.
We got plenty of gas, and we know where it is, but no one's going to let you take it out of the ground because, you know, the environment.
I mean, I just don't get it. I love Australia. I think it's an amazing country, but your policy is just baffling.
How do we fix this baffling contradiction in our country?
Australia's economy is facing quite the slowdown, with GDP, or gross domestic product, up by just 0.4% in the June quarter. The biggest boost came from services exports, since we're seeing a lot more international students and tourists here. However, businesses are reducing their inventories and households are seriously cutting back on consumption. And given people are having to spend a lot more on their rent, mortgages, food and other essentials, household savings have dropped to 3.2%, their lowest level since the global financial crisis. Now, it's unlikely we'll fall into a technical recession, which is when the economy shrinks for 6 months in a row. But we're officially now in a per capita recession. Basically, when you strip out the effects of migration or population growth, each of us, on average, is getting poorer. So that's why it feels like we're in recession.
A cost of living crisis because of inflation, which Australian Donald Trump, Mark Boris, says was caused by governments putting too much money into the economy. What Marky Mark actually means is the $40 billion in JobKeeper that went to his corporate friends who lied about their profits and are now price gouging the Australian public out of their livelihoods. He won't say that though because he's at the same cocktail parties as those CEOs. And then the RBA governor's genius solution, what he gets paid $1 million a year for, is not to bother calling out these companies who are using their profits and are making a lot of money for shareholders but are adding to the cost of living crisis. What his solution is, average Australians must sacrifice their wages and houses in order to save the economy that governments and corporations fucked up.
The RBA just warned growth could stay in the slow lane for years to come. Here's why Australia's economy is cooked, and it's not just bad luck. First up, Australian households are drowning in debt. 112% of GDP. That's one of the highest rates in the developed world. We're not broke because we're lazy. We're broke because both Labor and Liberals spent the last 30 years convincing us that property speculation was wealth creation. Now the RBA admits that if growth stays weak or rates don't drop fast enough, a lot of families are going to feel serious financial stress. This was always coming. Second, we bet the entire economy on one customer. 40% of our exports go to China, mostly rocks, iron ore, coal, natural gas. Now, China's economy is slowing down. Their steel demand dropped 4.4% last year with another 1.5% drop forecast. That's not China being difficult, that's just their economy maturing. But here's the problem our government created. We literally cannot find alternative markets big enough to replace that demand. There's no other country that needs the volume of iron ore and coal that China does. We are completely exposed. Third, we've had decades to prepare for this, decades to build alternatives, decades to diversify. But we didn't invest in manufacturing. We didn't build advanced industries. We just kept selling the same commodities to the same customer and hoping it would last forever. That's not China's fault. That's our fault. Both Labor and Liberal knew we needed economic diversification. They just never bothered because the mining money was too easy. The slow lane isn't bad luck. It's 30 years of terrible policy and economic management from both sides. They chose short-term profits for their mates over long-term prosperity for us. And now we're all paying the price.
If you've been wondering why you can't afford groceries or to live, let me show you. And I'll let you know right now it's got nothing to do with fucking tariffs. Let's start in the 1950s and 60s where Menzies opened the door for foreign buyers. Whitlam gave away our mining rights. Hawke and Keating sold off Aussie companies and let the banks run wild. Then Keating let foreign owners buy up our farmland. John Howard turned housing into an investment and sold our critical assets overseas. Rudd, Gillard, Turnbull and Abbott all let global firms buy Australian homes. Morrison handed all of our COVID money to big business. And he also let the big supermarkets completely fucking price gouge us. But yeah, the problem is definitely in the tariffs, hey?
Australia just broke a world record, but not the good kind. We now hold the global title in collapse in household income out of all the developed nations. Since 2022, real household income in Australia has dropped by 8%. That is the biggest fall in history, not just our history, but the entire developed world. The OECD confirms it. Whilst income in developed nations rose across 2024, Australia actually went backwards. Only Finland joined us in our decline, and they still did better than us. Since the pandemic, Aussie income has barely budged. It's up just 0.1%. Meanwhile, the rest of the developed world has surged up. Canada up by 5.5%. The US up by 8.6%. The UK up by 2.5%. But Australia, we've flatlined. And why is this? It's because our labour productivity is collapsing, and our economy and our government is addicted to population growth over real value creation. Unless we can reverse this trend as soon as possible, we're headed to a lost decade. One where Aussies work harder for less, while the rest of the world pulls ahead. How much longer are we going to allow our government to bury our future under higher taxes, lower wages, and record migration while telling us this is all completely fine?
You might not know this, but the latest GDP figures are out and it's not looking good. GDP grew just 0.3% this quarter and 0.8% for the year. Even worse, GDP per capita shrank by 0.3% this quarter and 1.5% for the year. That's 7 straight declines in living standards since the Labor government took over. Now here's where it gets worrying. With a 2.5% rise in population and government spending up 1.5%, the private economy shrank by about 4% in real terms over the year, and productivity down 0.5% per hour worked. So even with more people, we're producing less per hour. The one silver lining, government investment jumped 6.3%, mostly driven by states ramping up spending by 8.8% in the quarter. But let's not get too excited. They're just catching up after 3 quarters of cuts. Meanwhile, government spending rose 1.4%. But here's the catch. Energy rebates just shifted money from households to government payments for energy companies, literally shifting the deck chairs on the Titanic. And what are households doing? Saving, not spending. Despite tax cuts and energy rebates, people are bracing for tougher times. The numbers don't lie, confidence is low. What do you think? Let me know in the comments and have a great day.
Everyday life in Australia has turned into a financial battlefield. Groceries, rent, fuel, electricity, everything is expensive. A trip to the supermarket feels less like shopping and more like a robbery. A basket of basics, bread, milk, vegetables, costs double what it did a few years ago. Families walk through aisles calculating every item, deciding what they can afford to leave behind. Fuel prices make every commute a punishment. Filling up the tank feels like a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Electricity bills arrive like threats, punishing households for simply existing, heating, cooling, lights. All of it now feels like indulgence. And wages, frozen, stagnant, completely disconnected from reality. And people are working harder than ever, yet their paychecks vanish before the month even begins. The so-called middle class is shrinking, swallowed by debt and despair. Parents are cutting back on food to pay rent. Students are skipping meals to afford textbooks. Pensioners are rationing medication because the bills keep climbing. This isn't just inflation, it's suffocation. A system where survival has become the national pastime, where the cost of living isn't just high, it's hostile, it's designed to drain, to exhaust, to humiliate. And the message is clear. In Australia today, every dollar is a battle, every bill is a punishment, and every trip to the supermarket is a reminder that prosperity has collapsed into panic.
Very few Australians understand just how much they are sacrificing for mass migration. And the word sacrifice is really important there because Australians are losing something, but someone else is gaining something. And so in relation to migration, what that means is that all the things that you have to give up and sacrifice, like being able to afford a home or have an appropriate wage or even be able to have children, these things that you are giving up are actually to someone else's benefit. And the people who benefit from mass migration and the sacrifice you have to make to accommodate for it, these are the people who push for mass immigration. And the point I'm making about sacrifice is clearly exemplified in this graph. We can see that when mass immigration really began in the 2000s, how per capita GDP has been declined ever since in lockstep with increases of migration. And you can think of a declining per capita GDP as your share of Australia's total economic output is decreased. That means that you have lower wages, worse public services, just an overall worse standard of living. And all of this at the behest of someone else's benefit. Again, the people who push for mass immigration.
As a country, Australia is falling apart. Some might say it's being destroyed on purpose. This is why we need to march on October 19. In the Australian Financial Review, there was a report on the global scoreboard for efficiency and prosperity. Out of 38 of the richest countries in the world, Australia came 37th. Pretty embarrassing. 30 years ago, we were at the top 10. 20 years ago, we were 15th. 5 years ago, we were 25. What could have happened? Realistically. Now, this is a kick in the teeth. On the scoreboard, ahead of us are Costa Rica, Slovakia, Lithuania, Estonia. Please help me. These are like almost third world countries, but with the people we're bringing in and the behaviour that we are accepting, when you bring another third world into where you live, you become the third world. We need to raise our living standards for our children. We need to have a manageable cost of living. Our wages have been stagnant for years. We need to fix our country. I mean, we've been falling down for so many years, but we still ship $5 billion a year in foreign aid. But we don't have that money. Last year, good old Anal Albanese borrowed $87 million. Then he sent 5 overseas. This is beyond a joke.
Australia's economy is cooked. Household debt to income ratio is a whopping 200%. Total property value is 6.4 times of its GDP. The unemployment rate is 4.4%. Almost 70% of the new mortgage is still residential mortgage. This does not make any sense. Let's look at each data point and compare it with other countries to see how astonishing it is. In the third quarter of 2024, Australia's household debt to disposable income ratio was 189%. Compare that to the UK at 125% and Europe and the US at 80%. Only India, Canada and New Zealand have ratios as high as Australia because they can't handle the debt load anymore, which is why they need to bring in so many Indian immigrants. Let's keep looking. As of mid-2025, GDP reports show that Australia's GDP for the past year was 1.8 trillion, while the total value of its housing market was 11.56 trillion, an astonishing 6.4 times higher. For comparison, China's ratio is only 4 to 5 times, and even at its craziest, Japan's was just 5.5 times. Judging by this metric, Australia's real estate market is teetering on the edge of a cliff. The key issue is, instead of hitting the brakes, they're still stepping on the gas. According to the latest data, a total of 144 billion in new loans were issued, of which 98 billion were for housing loans, accounting for 68%. Loans for business operations made up only 24%. In this country, no one is doing business. No one wants to innovate. Everyone just wants to speculate on real estate. Why bother running a business working hard all year just to earn the combined wages of a husband and wife, when you can make tens of thousands just by lying at home and speculating on property? In the US, by contrast, housing loans and business loans are basically split 50-50. That's why their capacity for innovation is so strong. More money is used for business. In the US, the father starts businesses, while in Australia, the son collects rent. For a moment, it's hard to tell who's actually smarter. Australia's latest unemployment rate has reached 4.4%. That sounds okay, right? It's not like the Great Depression when it went above 10%, right? But let me tell you, this number is inflated. According to the official definition, as long as you work even 1 hour a week, you're considered employed. So the real unemployment rate is much higher than this figure. Australia's economy is like a leaky reservoir. On one side, high inflation, prices, housing costs, and generous welfare all cause water to leak out. On the other, a rush of immigrants is used to fill the reservoir. Do you think the government doesn't know the problems immigration brings? Issues like inflation, public safety, and cultural incompatibility? But they have no choice. The economy is on life support, and this stimulant can't be stopped. So immigrating to Australia is basically a Ponzi scheme. Either hurry up and come, or don't come at all. I'm Calculation Experiment, your real estate advisor in Melbourne. Like and follow if you get it. It's not just about real estate.
Can someone explain to me how this is possible, that we are spending billions of dollars overseas, yet royalties are only collected at 2 to 3%, and then the taxpayer is paying 3 times, 4 times more than big corporations? Now, we also have to look at the fact that 1,200 companies don't pay taxes in this country, but if we were to collect every year, that would be $39 billion back to the taxpayer, but they don't collect it. They go after the small people. Then we go on to pay $50 million per year to take care of past politicians that have ruined this country. Every single one of them from both sides of the aisle. Then we're paying $1.something billion per year to keep Parliament House open. Can someone please explain to me where this money is coming from? Where is it coming from? But what does jump in my mind is Godfrey Bloom, who was an ex-MP, and he talks about fractional banking. He jumps in my mind. Counterfeiting. You know, the more I research, the more I am disheartened, and the more I see how people are very conditioned over the years, over the generations, about supporting big parties. I just hope Australia wakes up. I remember when I was travelling overseas, people used to say Australians were stupid. And now I get it. We are stupid. We are definitely stupid.
Commissioner, Mr. President, I rise again, I'm afraid, to make the same old hoary speech that I've been making here for several years, and that is, it is my opinion that you do not really understand the concept of banking. All the banks are broke. Bank Santander, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, they're all broke. And why are they broke? It isn't an act of God. It isn't some sort of tsunami. They're broke because we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that banks can lend money that they don't actually have. It's a criminal scandal, and it's been going on for too long. To add to that problem, you have moral hazard, a very significant moral hazard from the political sphere. And most of the problem starts in politics and central banks, which are part of the same political system. We have counterfeiting, sometimes called quantitative easing, but counterfeiting by any other name. The artificial printing of money, which if any ordinary person did, they'd go to prison for a very long time. And yet governments and central banks do it all the time. Central banks repress the amount of interest that rates are, so we don't have the real cost of money. And yet we blame the real retail banks for manipulating LIBOR. The sheer effrontery of this is quite astonishing. It's central banks that manipulate interest rates, Commissioner. And plus, underneath all this, we talk loosely, in a rather cavalier fashion, do we not, about deposit guarantees. So when banks go broke through their own incompetence and chicanery, the taxpayer picks up the tab. It's theft from the taxpayer. And until we start sending bankers, and I include central bankers and politicians, to prison for this outrage, it will continue.
Australia's economy isn't just slowing, it's sliding. GDP is down, productivity is collapsing, growth has stalled, and the so-called lucky country is staring down the possibility of economic freefall. Politicians call it challenging, economists call it cyclical, but for ordinary Australians, it feels like collapse. It feels like the system itself is crumbling. Businesses are closing, jobs are disappearing, investment is drying up, and the government's response? Spin, press conferences, empty promises. GDP decline isn't just a number, it's a signal. It means fewer jobs, it means shrinking wages, it means less money for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. It means a nation that once prided itself on stability is now teetering on the edge of collapse. And while the numbers fall, the human cost rises. Families lose homes, workers lose jobs, communities lose hope. The so-called resilience politicians brag about is nothing more than survival, dressed up as policy. Australians aren't resilient because they want to be. They're resilient because they have no choice. This isn't just a downturn.
It's predicted by next year, Australia will be $1 trillion in debt. Fuck me, that's a lot. With projects like $40 billion a year for the wind turbines paid to foreign companies. How's that money paid? Through both our taxes, our fucking taxes that should stay in Australia, and our electricity bills going up. 50 to 70% of our bills are going overseas to these fuckheads. Now, if you want to be, nice and net zero and very nice for the environment, these things are the worst. They're coal-fired. They need electricity from the grid to run. It takes them 24 hours to warm up before they can start gathering electricity. And they don't work. A lot of the experts that are coming out to speak against them to say how bad they are for the environment are silenced and threatened with their jobs, their careers, everything like this. So if you're not happy with it, talk to your local member of parliament. Hassle the shit out of them. Walk in with your bill. Don't fucking email. Walk into the office with your bill and say, this is my bill. It's going up because of this bullshit. What are you going to do about it? You're my member of parliament. You represent everyone in this area. What are you going to do about it? If everyone does this, they'll shit themselves. Start standing up or you'll fucking lose everything, yeah? They're fucking us hard. Drop your comments.
Whether you're local or international, I thought you might have an interest in what's actually going on in Australia at the moment. These are official data. I've got a number of slides to go through, so stick with me if you have even a passing interest in what's going on. This is the current CPI over here. As you can see, in the 1970s, not so great. It was just ticking along for more than a decade, and in the last, for obvious reasons, it's kicked up. It's heading down in the right direction. Some of that is to do with government subsidies on energy and other things. Next, we've got the unemployment rate, which, as you can see, is heading in it's headed in exactly the right direction and has started to creep up a little bit. But broadly speaking, Australia is at virtually full employment. Now, something to note is the vast majority of employment added in the last 12 months has been public sector. So private sector is anemic growth, if anything negative potentially, but private sector growth of jobs in Australia, like many other Western economies, has increased significantly. Next, you've got hours worked. People are certainly putting in the hours, no question about it. That's gone up and up and up. But that might not be a sign of productivity. What you've got here is the largest increase to immigration in the history of the country, no question about it. Most predictions say it's going to be more than 1 million people within 12 months coming into an economy of about 24 million people, which is it's small, but it's a large as a percentage compared to any other immigration intake ever. When you've got a large immigration intake, which might be fine in the end, you need to build houses. This is the construction starts in Australia, as you can see. Peaked around the time that we'd expect it to and has been steadily declining, and I think will be something approaching, certainly a per capita record low this year. And what are the reasons for that? There are a number of reasons. Some of them is that there's some NIMBYism. Some of it is that state and local government approvals are too slow. But this is a big one. This is the ratio of new cost construction to average full-time male earnings. Now, I assume they use this data because that's the only measure they had back in 1975. But this tells you that the cost of construction in Australia has gone up and up and up and up and does not look to be slowing down. Earnings growth has been anemic, and one of the things that has gone up is the taxation as a percentage of GDP. So you can see this graph here, it starts all the way down here, and this is taxation as a percentage of GDP, I believe, across all levels of government. So it's just going up and up and up. Here's where I think we come to the crunch. This is the Australian taxation revenue. I'm going to get out of the way here, and you can see back in 2013-14, it was X, now it is X plus plenty. It is all the way up, up, up as a percentage. Taxation revenue is just being soaked out of people, and the tax to GDP ratio is way out. It's approaching 28, 29%. But this is all just increased taxation. We're running a very small surplus, budgetary surplus. But as you can see, if you feel a bit poorer, it's because your taxes have gone up and up and up. And finally, this is the one that's probably the most alarming. This is the real household income for individuals or for households. Look at this. This is the last 6 quarters in Australia, I believe that's right. Real per capita income, household income has fallen like a rock. So when you take into account the fact that housing construction has dropped like a stone, there's more homeless issues all over the place. You've got record immigration, you've got record taxation, and household income, mostly due to inflation and tax take, has gone down, 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 down. This is a concerning set of numbers. It's not catastrophic, but it's a concerning set of numbers for the Australian economy. If you feel like, you get that instinct that things aren't going so well, here's all the data to explain why. There are options, there are things that can improve. There's a decent chance that next year is going to be much better than this. But when you look at this data, you can see that we're on the wrong track in so many directions. And we'd love to see a little bit lower taxation. Like some of this sort of business is just catastrophic. This is wealth destruction for middle income families. It's absolutely disgraceful. So this is it. If you want to know what's going on in Australia, here it is in official data. There are other things to consider, but this gives you a bit of a snapshot.
I'm really sick of people blaming Australia's housing crisis on immigrants as an opportunity to be racist, xenophobic or bigoted. So let's explain in this serious video, I've got the mic out, why immigration is not driving Australia's housing crisis. Let's be clear, the numbers, the statistics, the history just do not support this claim. For example, during COVID, when the borders were closed, migration was as pretty much close to zero. House prices rose by 25% in little over a year. If immigration was the main driver for rising house prices, prices should have fallen or at the very least plateaued significantly during lockdowns. They didn't. They continued to rise. Australia has a massive housing supply crisis because we're just simply not building enough homes. The National Housing Supply and Affordability Council reports that Australia will fall between 260,000 and 375,000 homes short of the target to build 1.2 million new homes by mid-2029. So for every 5 homes that we need in this country, we're only on track to build about 4. And no state is meeting its targets. No state or territory is building enough to meet its share of housing construction targets, regardless of their individual migration levels or the politics in that state. The next thing is that we have really significant planning and zoning restrictions in Australia that make it really hard to build medium or high density housing that would help to alleviate this problem and build houses quickly. Two examples. Nearly half of all residential land in Melbourne is zoned for 3 stories or less, and 77% of residential zoned land in Sydney is zoned R2, which is low density. That's like single family homes. That means in the vast majority of instances, even when you have a piece of land that you would like to maybe build a set of apartments on, you simply are not allowed to. And that means that it is very hard to build houses that people want to live in near the city, dwellings that are accessible and affordable in good locations that are convenient for where people work. That's why we have massive urban sprawl, and it's what pushes houses prices up, especially in urban areas where a lot of people want to live, because it is too competitive to try to buy houses in the middle of the city. So what is really driving high house prices in Australia? Firstly, there's decades of undersupply. The Housing Industry Association warns that misaligned government incentives are standing in the way of meaningful supply growth, and the private sector cannot deliver sufficient housing stock unless government structures and planning systems change. Then there's the investment and speculation culture. The housing crisis, which started decades ago with the idea that housing is an investment on which you can speculate because the value will appreciate and you will make money. Australia's tax system, negative gearing, capital gains concessions, etc., encourages property investment over home ownership. Then there's interest rates and credit. We had really low interest rates during and after the pandemic that made borrowing cheaper, which drove prices up across the country as it became more competitive to try to buy a home. And then there's construction industry challenges. There are skilled labour shortages in construction, rising material costs, and lengthy approval processes that need streamlining. The Australian context in 2025 is that demand is actually moderating. New demand for houses is moderating and is expected to stabilise to around 175,000 households per year from the 2025-26 financial year onwards. But housing supply remains the biggest challenge. And it's a national problem, right? Australia is facing a housing crisis across states. Almost every Australian state capital is amongst the most expensive cities in the world, regardless of the vastly different migration patterns that each of these cities have, because it's not a problem that is caused by immigration. Why does this matter? It matters because of policy focus, and the discussion needs to be on supply. Streamlining approval processes, revising zoning laws to allow higher density housing developments, particularly near transport hubs, could significantly boost supply. That will have the biggest impact for the most people. But the other thing is that there are enormous economic benefits of migration. Cutting permanent migration may make housing cheaper, probably not for all the reasons I've just explained, but it will definitely make the country, us as individuals, poorer, because migrants contribute to economic growth, they fill skill shortages, and they pay taxes that fund infrastructure, all of which is something that overall massively benefits our economy and allows Australia to continue to experience economic growth. The bottom line for Australia is this. Supply shortage is the dominant factor. It has nothing to do with demand-side economic policy. The second is that planning and zoning restrictions severely limit where and what can be built. Third is to remember that housing prices have continued to rise in Australia even when our migration has been at literally zero during COVID, and that investment speculation and tax policies play a much larger role than anything else in dictating housing prices. Focusing primarily on immigration as a solution detracts from the real issues that Australia needs and also scapegoats immigrants and blames them for a crisis that they absolutely did not create. Planning reform, increased construction, and policies that prioritise housing people over housing as an investment vehicle is what will change things. The path forward isn't about cutting migration. It simply will not make the difference. It's about building homes that Australians need through smarter planning, better policies, and increasing supply.
So here we are, the so-called lucky country, the nation that once sold itself as a beacon of prosperity, stability, and opportunity. And yet Australians are staring at an economy that feels like it's collapsing in slow motion. GDP is sliding, growth has stalled, productivity is shrinking, and everyday life, it's suffocating. Because let's be honest, this isn't just a downturn, it's not just inflation, it's not just a temporary cycle, this is systemic failure. A nation where prosperity has been replaced with panic, where stability has been replaced with survival, and where collapse is no longer unthinkable, it's inevitable. Everything is expensive. Groceries, rent, fuel, electricity, the basics of survival have become luxuries. A trip to the supermarket feels like a robbery. A tank of petrol feels like indulgence. Utility bills arrive like punishment notices. Families are forced to choose between food and rent, medicine and electricity, transport and savings and wages, frozen, stagnant, completely disconnected from reality. People are working harder than ever, yet their paychecks vanish before the month even begins. The so-called middle class is shrinking, swallowed by debt and despair. Parents are cutting back on food to pay rent. Students are skipping meals to afford textbooks. Pensioners are rationing medication because the bills keep climbing. This isn't resilience. This isn't doing it tough. This is suffocation, a system where survival has become the national pastime, where the cost of living isn't just high, it's hostile. GDP decline isn't just a number, it's a signal. It means fewer jobs, it means shrinking wages, it means less money for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. It means a nation that once prided itself on stability is now teetering on the edge of collapse. Politicians call it challenging. Economists call it cyclical. But for ordinary Australians, it feels like collapse. It feels like the system itself is crumbling. Businesses are closing, jobs are disappearing, investment is drying up. And the government's response? Spin, press conferences, empty promises. GDP falling isn't just about charts and graphs, it's about families losing homes, workers losing jobs, communities losing hope. The so-called resilience politicians brag about is nothing more than survival dressed up as policy. Australians aren't resilient because they want to be. They're resilient because they have no choice. Behind every statistic is a story. A family forced to move out of the suburb they've lived in for decades. A single parent working 2 jobs, still unable to keep up. A student living in a share house with 6 others pretending it's temporary. A pensioner quietly packing up because the landlord wants market value. These aren't isolated struggles, they're everywhere, they're daily. They're the quiet crisis no one wants to name. And the human cost is devastating. Relationships strained, communities fractured, mental health collapsing, and people living in cars, in tents, in motels, while landlords expand portfolios and politicians give speeches about resilience. And yet, the government pretends this is fine. They call it market forces. They say it's challenging. They frame it as global pressures. But it's not global when groceries double in price. It's not temporary when families are forced out of their homes. It's not resilience when people are living in cars. They'll say Australians are resilient, that they're adaptable, that they're resourceful. But resilience isn't a policy. Adaptability isn't a solution. Resourcefulness isn't a safety net. These are survival mechanisms, and survival shouldn't be the baseline in a wealthy nation. The truth is simple. The government knows. They know the rent is too high. They know the wages are too low. They know the GDP is collapsing, but they're not fixing it. Because they're not feeling it, because they benefit from it, because they own the homes, they sit on the boards, they write the policies, they cash the checks. Australia sells itself as paradise, beaches, sunshine, opportunity, stability. But what does it mean when the people who live here don't believe it anymore? What does it mean when citizens feel trapped, exploited, and betrayed? What does it mean when the lucky country feels like a scam? It means the identity is broken. The myth is shattered. The brand is hollow. Because if working full-time still leaves you broke, if rent eats half your income, if housing is treated like a stock portfolio, and if the government keeps gaslighting you into thinking it's your fault, then what exactly are we proud of?